but it was such a rewarding experience because you understand like just the value of life. Because one day you'll become this cute elder, right? That needs to play volleyball with the beach ball volleyball, and just seeing like how happy they are on the simple things, and just how people care so deeply about them, their family. And so I think that experience really allowed me to see like what was life really about.
Well, I love the San Gabriel Valley.
Welcome to the My SGV podcast.
So I grew up here and I still live in Alhambra.
I was raised in between Temple City and Alhambra.
Eventually resided in South San Gabriel.
Our mission is to capture and share the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley.
Monterey Park has pretty much been my whole life.
Well, I'm proud to say that I was born and raised in the San Gabriel Valley.
We believe our diversity is what makes the SGV great. And no matter where you are from in the San Gabriel Valley, you will feel welcome. All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the My SGV podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you are new here, we bring you the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. And if you are a returning listener, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We do very much appreciate it. 6th week, 7th week, I don't know how many weeks. It's only a few weeks for us because we record multiple shows in a day. Mm-hmm. But I think it's like the 6th or 7th week that Scott won't be here, right?
Yeah.
So it's the Russell show now. Just kidding. I think Scott will be back next time. But actually, today we're in the end of June, and the next time we'll be in studio is actually mid-September.
Yeah. That's
crazy, right?
Yeah.
But then from this episode, it'll be like a week from when the next show is on, but it'll be some time from now. So before the show, we're talking about our pregame here, right?
Yeah.
And, I guess therapy was the theme that we were going to go with. And had you ever gone to therapy or had a therapist?
Not for myself, no, but some of my family has gone to therapy.
So therapy wouldn't be like stigmatized in your family as something negative?
No, not really.
In my family of origin, nobody has gone to therapy. And I don't know if it would have been stigmatized. It just wasn't like talked about. Like it wasn't a thing. Nobody was aware of it. Now as an adult and trying to heal from my own trauma and whatnot, I've sought out healing on my own, but only recently have I started working with a therapist. And it's a totally different experience from trying to read a book or taking seminars or whatever. Being able to have dialogue with someone I found really helpful and just really impactful. Like if there's something I need to discuss or figure out, there's this person who's coming from this perspective that can really provide insight. So I think it's been quite helpful. Mm-hmm. But actually, I don't even know if I've shared that with you, that I have a therapist.
No, this is the first time I'm hearing it.
Through our insurance, I learned that you can get 16 sessions free from Path, and then they pay for it, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you need, their therapist can request more sessions when you're done.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So even just to be healthy, you could check it out. So, well, there's something new for you. Mm-hmm. Before we get to our guest, though, I want to thank Paris Baguette for providing the tasty pastries for our guest each week. Thank you to Jason. Go check them out, Paris Baguette in San Gabriel on Las Tunas. All right, let's get to our guest. Today's guest has journeyed from the world of real estate to the heartfelt field of mental health and wellness. After a decade of representing homeowners in the San Gabriel Valley, she's decided to align her career with her core values, taking a bold leap to pursue a degree in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and strategic coach dedicated to helping individuals and families tackle childhood traumas, grief, cultural stressors, and corporate burnout. Her passion for guiding clients toward empowerment and healing is unmatched, and she's currently immersed in a dissertation on self-care in generational trauma. She loves tennis, ping pong, progressive house, yes, and exploring the California coast, finding joy in the stories of vulnerability and resilience she encounters. She's a true foodie at heart, delighting in the diverse dining experiences throughout the SGV. the founder and owner of Momentum Mindfulness Family Counseling, Christine Wong. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Progressive house.
Love it.
Yeah, awesome. When I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I like that too. But yeah, I mean, you're so much more than just the music style that you like, but
Yeah. But it helps, it helps understand, what's that, music that makes you feel the most relaxed. I think everybody's music genre is different, right? And I think sparks different levels of joy for them.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's start with your connection to the San Gabriel Valley. How are you connected to the SGV?
I grew up in Monterey Park, and I went to elementary school in Monterey Highlands. Go Huskies. And, went to Chinese school and, grew up my entire childhood in Monterey Park and went to Mark Keppel. And I think one of my earliest memories is walking to grandma's house and walking to the old Thrifties over on Atlantic and Garvey and getting some, thrifty ice cream with your cousins and
for a quarter.
Yes. and a bag of hot Cheetos, right?
Yeah.
Like getting the whole, ensemble and really being, immersed in like a very simple but very joyous life of just being with family and, having your routines, playing in the backyard. And, eventually I got to an age where I really loved tennis. And I played a lot of tennis, played at Barnes Park, played at, every water park type of, tennis court and, traveled. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are so many memories for me. I forgot about going to Thrifties there. I went to that exact Thrifties all the time with my mom. I think remember it was CB Hughes Market instead of Ralph's, right? And there was a bowling alley across the street. I don't know if you remember that.
Don't remember that.
Yeah. That was like an Alhambra, I forget what they called it, something lanes. But so growing up in Monterey Park, you were like more up on the hill area, right? Rather than like by, I don't know, Hellman, Barnes Park sort of.
My grandmother's house was down over on Chandler.
Okay.
So I pretty much grew up in the heart of Monterey Park.
Oh, Chandler, isn't that Mandarin Noodle House?
Yes.
It's right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And what was life like growing up as a child? You said it was just very simple and family.
Simple family. Work hard. Watch your parents work hard. Go to school. Show up on time. Don't test the 8:10 morning. Just really be disciplined and go to bed early. Get to bed. Get to school early and pay attention in class. Like all the fundamental values of showing up, doing hard things and processing it with your parents. After school and getting that interaction going. I think that was very significant. And when I think of Monterey Park and think of the developmental years for myself.
You got to process your day with your parents. That's, I would say, unusual.
Very much so. I think
in a positive, very positive way.
Just to share. I mean, obviously, some days you don't get a response, right? Some days it's just a nodding of a head, right? But it's that validation as much as they can for the moment to validate how you feel, what went well, what didn't go so well, what do you want to eat, right? Like all these things, right? Like how to kind of engage with a young child around their emotions as best as they can. Yeah.
And what kind of child were you?
I think I was an anxious child. I think I was very nervous, very scared at times, didn't want to try new things, really worried. I would watch my cousin go, let's go to Six Flags. And I think I was a little apprehensive, I'm too scared, right? Just different things. I remember being called a scaredy cat when I was a kid. And I think for the most part, I was very anxious, very always kind of thinking worst case scenarios, even though there was no such thing at the time. I think while watching other kids just kind of live it up and really enjoy the moment, I think I was always a little bit more apprehensive growing up.
It sounds like you were aware of yourself at that age.
I think I was attuned with myself. I think I was nervous and worried because I think it's just that, innate feeling of performance. In our culture, sometimes it's you have to do well, get your straight A's, your peers are getting straight A's, you need to perform. And then when you fall short, it's easy to kind of have that self-reflection and say, you know what, maybe I can't compete, or maybe I can't match, that, 100% all the time. And so I think I, as a child, internalized a lot of it. Like, how come like certain kids can remember more words in Chinese school, and how come I can't? And like, and then eventually I think I took that energy and played a lot of sports. And that kind of helped me with my competitive spirit. But I think if I were to reflect when I was younger, I think that feeling of nervousness and worried definitely was very present.
Was that something given to you, or did you like impose that on yourself?
I think just like observing the environment. I think sometimes when you're a child, you're looking at all the adults in your life and how they're responding. And I think maybe that was something that was inherited, of like, I'm seeing certain aunties or like certain people in my life, or maybe the Chinese school teacher, and they're a little bit panicked, and maybe I'm just internalizing that emotion, and then I'm duplicating that emotion as a child.
It was modeled for you to act and be anxious and worry. So you said you found some sort of way to compete through sports and to I forget what you said, but so were you successful as a young athlete?
I mean, I played satellite tennis tournaments. I eventually got to like varsity in high school, and then played college tennis. Met Billie Jean King a few times. Met incredible girls from all over the country, and just got to know the different culture, like Panama, Paris, Hungary, Slovakia, Switzerland, like all these phenomenal women that I got to like meet and get to know, and just see like, wow, that's very much so different than Monterey Park. And have to like kind of grow up in that environment, and grow up in a sense where like, I think my developmental truly happened in college.
Well, it sounds like you were pretty good. Do you know what your rating was?
Like a 4 or 5.
Oh, that's really good. That's really
like
good.
4.0, 4.5.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So
probably not now, but
did you know that I went to Marquette?
I think you mentioned it.
When were you there?
I graduated in 2009.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't have known you then. So Keppel was a very different school by then, and I'm sure you've heard of the stories of how it was before then. But what was high school like for you there?
High school was good. I got to play a lot of tennis. Got to hang out with a lot of friends there. It was definitely a school of excellence even at that time. I think everyone was competing to get their GPA a certain way to go to the dream school that they want to. So it was definitely an environment that kind of fostered a lot of growth for a lot of people.
And you said you found yourself in college. So in high school, you were still sort of figuring out who you were. And who did you think that you were at that time?
I think there was a pipe dream of wanting to play tennis professionally.
Okay.
I think there was a dream of wanting to be some sort of creative artist. And yeah, I just knew also that because my family and a lot of people that I knew were already in real estate, that I had to do that. It was like, you just need to get your real estate license. And I'm like, okay.
So you didn't, aside from the tennis dream, you didn't have other dreams?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think the anxiety is what stops a person from dreaming all the way, because it's that worrying of, will it work out? So if someone else is like directing and telling you, I think you should do this, I think you should get your license here, I think you should, it's almost like the next best thing. You just helped me make a decision. So therefore I just went with the decision.
So is it correct to say that it manifests in like you would freeze in certain situations, like you would be paralyzed to make decision?
I think it's either overthinking, so it could be like a variation of flighting, like leaving the situation to make more options for yourself, and then that kind of puts you at a place of, so what is the decision? Now there's like 10 other options, right? And it could also manifest into freeze. And then obviously when you're not regulated, it could manifest into fighting, right? And I think that's like all like the nervous system response if we can't ground ourselves.
Yeah. And you mentioned your aunties were anxious, but what about your parents? How were they?
I think my parents were, my father was very much a leader. Like, he was very ambitious, very encouraging of me. And then my mom was also the same way. And of course, two different visions. One vision is, let's go into real estate. Another vision is, why don't you finish school and let's figure out what you're going to do. Are you going to be an attorney? Are you going to be a doctor? Whatever that is, right? Are you going to go into accounting work, right? And a lot to juggle, a lot to figure out. So it's like, obviously there's this underlying embedded message of like, we still need to respect our elders. So what's next? Let's just go with what they say for right now.
Would you still agree with that today?
It's a little bit more evolved. I think still respect your elders, but it's evolved to understand your own core values, understand what makes you you, and how much of this is your thoughts and how much of it is a model from something else, right? That trauma.
What was it in college that helped you to discover yourself or find who you are?
I think being in different environments and having a coach that worked really hard and pushing us to our limits, you know, learning discipline for the first time, you know, being outside, playing tennis at 6 a.m., and then training that, and then going to class and coming back out in the courts at 1, training that, and then having her scare us like on the treadmill and say, you better keep running. You're at 8, you better run to 9 and 10 and do these intervals. And then to the point where once the workout's done, she's like, I hope that you're ready to go watch the Australian Open. And that's like happening at 2 a.m. So it was like really infused. This discipline was so infused, and it was like, you don't question it, because if you question it, you get in trouble.
Wow. And you had not experienced discipline at that level
Never.
until then?
Yeah,
Did you have, sorry, I'm going back to high school. Did you have Gerback as a coach?
I did.
He was my freshman basketball coach. Oh, he was there for a long time. Oh, so we'll just leave it at that. So you had this really strict, but it sounds like it was a positive relationship with this coach in college. But then you still went to do real estate.
Yeah, I got my real estate license, I think, the junior year of undergrad. I'm the junior of my undergrad in Cal State LA. And then I remember like having to take finals and having to do open houses and having to like juggle everything. And the funny thing about it is I didn't even get my driver's license until afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you're starting your real estate career here. Wait, so how did you get to the open house?
I had help. I had people helping me the whole way through. Little aunties that helped me get there.
So you were like 21-year-old agent.
Like a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how was that?
What's it saying? It's like the fish in a fish in a pool of sharks. I felt like the fish. I felt like I was learning things from scratch and learning everything as I was going, which is very intimidating. It's very scary.
Yeah, I've heard that about the real estate career. Like not a lot of people are really willing to, help you and show you, because you're sort of competition from them.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And how long did you do that?
I did that for 8 to 9 years.
Oh, okay. So that's not a short time. You stuck with it. And what was that like for you?
It was an incredible journey. I got to meet so many people from all over the country. I was part of that network, as we talked about earlier. And that allowed me to meet so many people that were ultra performers. And that kind of each year expanded my mind. I was invited into like mastermind groups, which was great, and like learned from these top agents that read incredible books. So I would, read from like the psychocybernetics and the books on kind of taming your mind. Like it's called Taming Your Gremlin, right? And all these books to really help you think outside of yourself and still perform, because so much of real estate it's a lot of rejection, and how do you deal with that and keep going forward? And it was like a lot of it compressed.
Were you still anxious at that time?
Yeah.
You were?
I think anxiety is such a human response. I think even today, I get quite anxious about different things. And it's very much a human response. It's just a matter of, can we learn how to dial it down? Do we know where the levers are so we can kind of be mindful of ourselves, especially when we're heightened or feeling triggered or feeling like something in our senses is taking us back to a time where there's like a flashback, or maybe there's some sort of trauma, and how do we kind of regulate ourselves in the moment. So I think anxiety is, maybe it was more prevalent during that time, but I think now it's not that it's gone away. I think it's something where it's an active management of emotions.
In a class that I'm taking, it helps to recognize when certain emotions come up. Every resource, I think, lists different primary emotions, but this class lists as primary emotions sadness, gladness, confusion, frustration, and fear. And so anxieties, maybe like fear,
Could be.
fear,
Yeah.
confusion.
Yeah.
So did you enjoy that doing real estate?
I did.
You did.
Yeah.
And then when did the idea start to come about that you wanted to shift gears?
I had already been reading a lot of books on personal development, and most books had psychology in there, because very much like doing business has to do with psychology. And so I was kind of having this in the background, and then some things happened. There was some family changes. A few people in my family died in the same month, which was very hard. And it was a moment to bereave, but I didn't know at the time what bereavement was. So I just kept powering through. I kept working through it until I couldn't. And then it got to a place where I had mentors that I was very thankful of that were also LMFTs. And they really kind of supported me through it and taught me what bereavement looks like, and that this is maybe not the best time to keep working, keep pushing through it. And maybe this is a time for self-reflection, maybe getting your own therapist, figuring out what are these emotions all about. And I think the hardest part is in the times of grief, sometimes like culture may not support taking that time off, because they'd rather you just move on, keep going, just work through it, right? And that was something at the time that I kept challenging my own thinking on, because I knew that I couldn't at that time. And I chose...
You couldn't push through.
Yeah. And I chose in the moment to really uncover that for myself and see like what exactly is happening. And so I got pretty obsessed with like understanding the stages of grief and understanding what that looked like. And that kind of led me naturally into, let me go back to school, because I really want to know more about this.
I'm interested in two things. One, that you had multiple, it sounds like they were real estate agents who are also LMFTs?
No, it was just peer.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
peers.
And the second thing is the family members who you lost, you must have been close to them.
Yeah, very much close.
So you started your journey into learning about this through your own pain. And it sounds like you discovered your own cultural hang-ups around grief.
Yeah.
And was this coming from your family or something like bigger than that?
I think bigger. I think it made me understand that oftentimes like the solution is just to power through it. Just keep working hard, suppress your emotions. What are emotions anyways? Just keep making money, right? And I think that was something that I wasn't willing to accept anymore. And I had to make that difficult decision and take like that leap of faith and go back to school, which is quite scary at the time.
How did you know you weren't able to or willing to just push through and shove these feelings?
Because I tried to.
And then how did it manifest that you were unable to?
Because I kept asking myself, I want to do more. I think I want to do more in my life than this.
More meaning like have more impact or more meaning?
More meaning, like that existential question of like, what does this all mean? Like 2 family members dying in the same month. What does this all mean? Right? Do I want to make sure that the life that I live is one that I stand by it, I'm proud of it. And I think that was that call to take that leap of faith and make a decision that at the end of it all, I can stand by it and I can feel really good about it.
Well, kudos to you. That's not an easy decision to make. You know, I have a similar story when I was doing loans, like mortgage loans. This was in 2008. And I remember just looking at the check and I was like, this doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked ahead at like 20 years and I was like, I don't know that I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I made that choice then to stop that. But yeah, that's a tough decision.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're wanting to pursue this, and you say you go back to school. Were you still doing real estate at the same time?
I was. Yeah, I sold one of the last transactions I sold was, I think, the first year in my master's.
And forgive me, you're an LMFT, but do you also have a PsyD?
I'm working on my PhD now.
Oh, PhD, not PsyD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because Pepperdine does have a PsyD, I believe, right? And that's different.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, and is this like LMFT requires, I think, like 2,000 supervised hours or something?
3,000.
3,000. Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that equate to?
That can equate to 2 years or all the
Depends
way up to
on
7 years.
yeah,
Depends
how
on
long.
how you can. Yeah.
So for the listener, that's like how many hours of supervised therapy you have to have before you can actually be practicing on your own.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So the commitment is
Yeah.
long term. And you knew that you're like, okay, I'm going to go all in and finish this.
Yeah.
Did you ever doubt during that journey, like maybe I shouldn't be doing this?
100%. I think doubt is such a human nature response. That imposter syndrome voice that comes in. What did you get yourself into? Things were so good. What are you talking about now? Like, why are you studying for this exam? And I think asking that question of core values of like, what would this mean? What would doing all this mean to you? And I think I would always kind of recenter myself in the process and keep going. But I think that voice definitely came.
How would you recenter yourself? And where did you develop that tool?
Like grounding, a lot of deep breathing, a lot of journaling, a lot of listening to maybe podcasts, like preferred podcasts, a lot of reading just to get really clear on what that inner voice looked like. And was that an inner voice of empowerment or was that an inner voice of self-sabotage?
I'm so fascinated by your story. I'm learning about like motivation towards and away, right? And people are often motivated away from, right? Like to fear, like they fear something. And I'm sure you know this, right? But the motivation towards is like so much more powerful. Like nothing's going to stop you, if you have that. And it sounds like before, like often you were motivated away, and now you're like, I'm reaching for this thing. I'm going towards this thing.
It's that push-pull method, right? It's when we want to do what we need to do, that's where we need to align to our core values because our core values will actually pull us to where we want to go. Because when we push, it's like it's contingent upon a lot of things. Your energy, how do you feel that day? Are you clear with what you want? Rather than being pulled by your core values, the decision is made already at that point. It's that pain and pleasure, as you're talking about, being pulled to pleasure or being pulled away by the pain.
As a person who's experienced a lot of procrastination in my life, and then looking back and realizing, like, let's say in college, and there's a deadline, right? But 3 months before, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this in this week, and it's a structured thing, and inevitably it was always like the last minute, right? And then to see that until the perceived pain had become so strong, that was the only thing to motivate me. But then also looking back and seeing the things that I really love to do, like I didn't need any push. I was like just gonna go out there and do it.
And it doesn't feel like work. Once it's like aligned to your passions and values, it no longer feels like work.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a long journey to go.
Yeah.
And then so you make it. You're a licensed therapist now, and so what was it like going through that process to get licensed and now have your own practice?
It's been such a rewarding process. I think one of my first internships, I was working with the dementia Alzheimer's population out in West LA. It's called OPICA, and working with all these elders. And I also worked with the Nisei population. So a lot of the elders that kind of went through the internment camps, and just to be in that space and having a senbei with them and ask them questions, right, like around their traumas, and seeing that there's a lot of resistance there, right? There's a lot of resistance in the trauma, but also cognitive decline was already happening. But it was such a rewarding experience because you understand like just the value of life. Because one day you'll become this cute elder, right? That needs to play volleyball with the beach ball volleyball, and just seeing like how happy they are on the simple things, and just how people care so deeply about them, their family. And so I think that experience really allowed me to see like what was life really about, and having that be one of the internships like really transformed the experience in accumulating these 3,000 hours.
Wow, that must have been something.
Yeah.
They must have had a lot of stories.
A lot of stories. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I actually love spending time with older people. I
Me
say
too.
older, like elderly, but they have so much experience and knowledge and wisdom
For sure.
and stuff that you can't get out of a book or take a class.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. So you sort of, got a lot of experience and perspective from this. And how does that translate into, your work now as a therapist with your clients?
I think now as a full-time licensed marriage family therapist, my approach is very, very much the humanistic experience of unconditional positive regard and helping the client right where they're at, and helping them really see like therapy can feel very daunting, especially like coming to terms with I need to see a therapist. And I think sometimes that stigma is so unbearable that they'll prolong that period for a couple of years until they go to their first session, right? And I try my best to make the experience as approachable at their pace, so that they can feel like it takes the pressure off. And I think working with elders was where I really practiced that, right? They're coming in to the day center, and they just have to be present. They can't change, or they can't make certain things to their preference. They can only just be present in the moment. And I try to create that same environment in a therapy session, and just allow the essence of the person to feel comfortable enough to share their story with me.
Yeah. I'm curious about the whole generational trauma stuff, like how you see that and what you know about that. But before we get into that, Christine, we ask each guest to bring something with them. What did you bring with you today?
I brought this book. This book was quite transformative. This book is by Louise Hay. It's called You Can Heal Your Life. And when we talk about, that positive self-talk and how sometimes it's hard to find it, I think most of our thoughts at times can be very self-critical. We are sometimes our own worst enemies, and the things that we'll say to ourselves is quite unrelenting and mean and not helpful. And so I find this book to be really empowering in a sense, where this is kind of like the grandmother of all positive affirmations. And this book was really helpful as I was transitioning from school to a new career, and to making decisions and being centered in my core values and what I believe in myself and what I can do and can't do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that in.
Of course. My pleasure.
In all the like language and stories that we're sharing here, like I'm feeling like that you must have experienced some trauma growing up, but you're that hasn't been a part of your story so far, right?
Yeah.
Even though you experienced anxiety, right? So can we talk about generational trauma? I have an idea of what I think that is, and so can you share what is the definition of that?
I think generational trauma is, watching sometimes even your grandparents and just hearing their story of how they became Asian Americans. What was their immigration journey like? And I think sometimes in that story, what's embedded is that need to survive, that need to assimilate to culture, and how hard it was to be in America and not know the language, but also need to, support the family and really trying to make it. And I think that generational trauma is embedded where we have to work hard and perform and support the family and respect our elders. And I think sometimes where it gets too intense is that we forget to care for ourselves because we're working really hard. And I think that's one of the elements, I think, to do with generational trauma, where we need to care for ourselves, because our life matters, and how we speak to ourselves matter, because how we speak to ourselves consistently will be reflected in how our relationships are with other people.
Yeah. I met with a friend today, and her father is disturbed. She knows this, and she was telling me that he would say things to her, and she's like mid 40s, and they have this word. She said there's this word in Chinese. One is like that you're not supposed to disrespect your elder, something like that, or a phrase. And then the other was that he was going to remove resources, like financial resources, like as a threat. And she's like 40 something, right? And I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. The mindset behind that, like he must still want to control her at such an old age, you know? But sorry, what struck me was that she said that these are cultural terms, or like there's an actual like phrase that Chinese, you know. That really struck me. This whole respecting elders thing.
I think it comes down to like acknowledgement. I think sometimes when the generational trauma population of like that immigrational journey, and how so much tragedies happen, and how that sometimes is kind of brushed underneath the rug, and they don't have maybe the words to express that, other than why is that person always mad, right? Versus like really getting to the heart of, okay, that must have felt unfair when we weren't understood, and that we had to kind of work under really hard conditions, and that we might have not had the same opportunities as the people that we saw all around us. And I think that sometimes can manifest into grief or anger, or this, you know, deep rooted of, I can't believe my children aren't being grateful to me, or I can't believe my children aren't acknowledging me or making me feel valued, because so much of how I kind of assimilated to the culture, I didn't feel valued. And I think there's grief happening in every direction. And then, of course, like the filial piety of, you need to just respect me, right? You need to respect the elders at all costs. And that's where I would say it's really important to understand, what's our self-care look like? How do we talk to ourselves? Maybe our self-esteem is kind of broken because we didn't really have that modeled for us, and we didn't have that acknowledgement. But just as much as we want to feel loved, accepted, affirmed, heard, our elders do too, even if they're not asking for it.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm not a one who believes that elders should be respected no matter what.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
that
agree
person.
with that.
I wasn't that person at 14, at 16, and I'm not that now. And even though I've said those words and I believe it in my core, at sometimes with my children, I've had a trigger, right, when they're behaving a certain way. And I had to learn, like, I'm supposed to model to them, I can handle anything that you've got. I can handle anything. Everything is okay. You can have big feelings, big words, whatever.
Yeah.
That took a lot of work, though, too.
I mean, there's always a desire to have a healed relationship with our parents, right? But that might not come in the form of this lifetime. But that doesn't mean we're not worthy to be healed for ourselves, because that might not be something realistic for our elders. But I think part of, you know, living that fully self-actualized life, it really comes down to like understanding what our emotions look like. And it's kind of like blaming effectively, right? Like, I blame so and so for these sets of, you know, scenarios, but also I have to recognize like what might have they have gone through to get to this place, and what can I do for myself to, you know, heal myself all along the rest of my life. Yeah.
What they might have gone through. Like, my mom would throw that in, like, anytime I would bring something, you don't know what I've been through, right? And that worked when I was younger, and now I'm like, I can have empathy for that, and I do have empathy for that. What I've gone through, I'm responsible to heal from. I'm responsible, like, it, you know, I can't use that as an excuse for the rest of my life to mistreat my children, right? Like, I have to heal from that. So, wow. I want to get into more of this, but let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Sometimes, even the best of us can slip up. That's why the law offices of Scott Wormuth are here to pick you back up again.
And while they strive to get you the biggest compensation possible, oh my gosh.
Their main concern is your health and recovery. They work closely with doctors and insurance companies to make sure you get the proper medical treatment.
Initial consultations are free, so give them a call.
At the law offices of Scott Wormuth, we're with you all the way.
I'm Scott Wormuth. We've been fighting for your rights for more than 40 years.
All right, we're back with Christine. Christine, before the break, we're getting to some heavy stuff, but I really enjoy that kind of stuff. Before we get back to you, when we come back from the break, we like to ask questions from this deck of cards called Icebreakers.
Fun.
And they're a way for everybody to get to know us a little bit better.
Okay.
Typically, I always skip over the deeper ones, but just knowing the type of work that you do and the person that I am, I'm okay with this question. So I chose one a little bit deeper than normal. So here we go. What's something you disagree with about the way you were raised?
I think growing up, I would have preferred to have more choice in what I wanted to learn and wanted to kind of be involved in. I think I would have liked more art classes, more creativity than like right into the math and the prepping for the SATs, and there are different things like that, or just like understanding math versus understanding like art and creativity and trying things and seeing that this is something that you created and does it look good and how can we improve on that versus you need to just learn your multiplication charts.
Yeah.
Victoria?
I think maybe like getting spanked. Yeah, I don't really agree with that. Like, used to, like, when parents would, like, explain why they're doing it, it's like, oh, okay, I guess that makes a little sense. But now that I'm older, I think something I wouldn't want to happen.
For sure.
Well, I don't agree with that either, how I was spanked growing up, but my choice was, I wish that my parents wanted to, like, know me, my thought life, and that they saw me. You know, who I was, what I feared, what I liked, what I wanted to do and be, all those things, you know. My childhood was filled with activities, but I would have given those up to be seen, to be known.
Yeah.
You know, so deeper than we've normally go on this show. But if you're watching online or listening, let us know what's something you disagree with about the way you were raised. My list is probably very extensive, but I just chose that one thing. Yeah. So back to the generational trauma and you're Asian. I don't know, the listener can't tell, but so in your clients, do you see a similar vein of generational trauma among people?
I think there's a component of immigrational journey and feeling misunderstood by maybe their elders and feeling like the stress of how do I get along with my mother? How do I get along with my father? And that could be a cultural thing, but that could be a very much American thing. And it's, you know, that desire, that need of like, why can't I feel accepted, affirmed, heard, and loved? I think sometimes like that trauma is very much there. And when we don't resolve that, we find that in our partners.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, big time. I've shared that on this show many times before, and I don't know if I've shared with you. The last partner I was with before I discovered all this was, in my opinion, a bona fide sociopath.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so I use that term like specifically for the criteria that I went back and looked at. And I was like very terrified. This person put me in the hospital.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and that was a scary thing. I mean, I've grown from that, but yeah, you'd have to definitely choose.
It's intense.
But what's scary is that is my mom, and I learned that after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I came to that realization, I was like, oh wow, you know, yeah.
It's that law of familiarity, right? Because it feels like home. It's like our emotional home, even though when we do our own study, our own self-reflection, we realize that was quite manipulative, or this was a little bit intense because why did it always have to go their way? And why couldn't they hear our perspective? So yeah, very intense. I think narcissistic abuse is quite intense. A lot of that personality disorder can be intense, especially if we're going into it blindly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sought out to learn a lot about that. And it's actually where I met my wife. I was in a support group for that.
Nice.
And we've been married 9 years this winter. But sorry, like I'm just curious, like about my mom. So my mom is that person, right? But then I had learned about it. I'm older. Now I can practice setting boundaries, which she like hated, right?
Yeah.
It was like a huge offense to her. And I'm okay. I'm okay to say this, like, I don't expect you to change. I'm just saying, hey, this is where you're not going to cross, right? And she's chosen not to remain in my life because of that discomfort.
Got it.
I very much wish that she could know that there's forgiveness over here, but she's unable to, just accept that I'm a different person now. Yeah.
I think that's sometimes a good clear picture of where they're at in their journey, because if there's a lot of resistance and not wanting to acknowledge their love, and that they have to kind of have that barrier because their preferences aren't being met at the time, that they couldn't see it for the family. I think that's very hard. And I think oftentimes when people put boundaries up, those boundaries are challenged, and it's almost like a person jumping over the line back, right? And it's important for us to acknowledge like that pattern.
Yeah. And at that time, I knew that setting the boundaries was going to be an offense to her, and I was okay with that. I mean, she's not intimidating, you know. She's 5 foot, 85 pounds, you know. And she doesn't have anything to hold over me, so I'm okay. I can say everything like I need to in a very calm way, but she just doesn't like it, you know. My sister, who's older than me, she's like, yeah, mom's like, oh, he called me a narcissist, and my sister's like, I called you that too. She's like, yeah, but you always say what you want to say. It's like, yeah, but the truth is though, like now that I have my own child, I see her lack of desire to repair things. And I can't see that I would ever do that if I had a rift with my child.
Right.
I can't see that. I would do everything to get that back. And that is like probably one of the most painful things. Yeah. Like she's, sorry, this is not about me.
It's hard to have self-awareness, and for you to have that self-reflection and understand the gravity of it and what you have to lose in the moment. That should tell you where you're at with your awareness, and that's a powerful virtue. And not a lot of people have that awareness. They're literally seeing their acting out as it's the first time that they've ever done it, because they don't remember all the times that they've already done it, right? And that's their lack of awareness.
Yeah. So when you get a new client, you said you create this safe space for them, and how do you develop that trust with them? How do you get them to share their story with you?
Trust takes time, having the patience for that, and also just kind of gauging and seeing maybe where they're at right now. Are they all in with therapy, or are they a little bit apprehensive? And if they're a little bit apprehensive, just to kind of create that environment and say, you're right where you need to be, and if you don't feel comfortable, we can take a pause. That's very much okay. You let me know what your needs are in the moment.
Do you ever have like really intense breakthroughs with your clients? What's that like?
It's very liberating. It's very liberating because I think sometimes, that imposter syndrome kicks in of, I don't know where this is all going to lead to, but I'm going to stick to my principles and stick to my standards as far as what I'm trying to do. And when you see the wheels turning, right, and you see like certain things being unlocked for them, it's very rewarding. It's very inspiring because I'm a human being as well. So I'm getting inspired by the work too. And it helps them create momentum for themselves because they can see like, wow, they can make progress for themselves. And even though at times it feels very, despair oriented or sorrow oriented, or even at times of grief, it just feels like there's no way out of it. And the reality is there is a way out of it.
Can you talk a little bit about your modalities? Because we talked a little bit before the show started, and I mentioned my therapist, and she maybe has like a dozen different things listed there. So what type of modalities do you use with your clients?
I like to do attachment focused EMDR, which is a trauma focused, but I like to kind of go back in time to see what the relationship has been with their parents, whether there was one or wasn't, and just to acknowledge some of the themes of what our current barriers they might have as adults. So I like to kind of use that as a focus for trauma. And of course, I love mindfulness. I think mindfulness is so great, just doing breath work and letting a client kind of go to that subconscious place and breathe and work on taking real breaths, not shallow breaths, not like panting, angry, scared, worried breaths, but really be present in the moment and helping them find that space. And I really like the somatic, as we mentioned, and acknowledging where are some of these traumas kind of locked in our bodies. I think sometimes it could be our shoulders, it could be our navel, our gut feeling. And I think it's empowering for us to kind of acknowledge, like, where is this stored and how can we kind of do that breath work to kind of slowly release it.
Yeah, the somatic was really interesting to me when I came across that at first. And I remember in some teaching, somebody was explaining how most people come to somatic experience as a modality. And it was fascinating that things can just get like stuck or trapped, like if you don't finish the, I don't know if it's called the cycle or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah.
I want to share with you one breakthrough that I recently had, right? I had been doing this practice of when I feel triggered to, first notice it and ask, and then to unidentify and ask that version of myself to just, what is it that they want to share with me? What are you bringing to me? What are you afraid of? And immediately the unidentifying from like, oh, I'm experiencing it to that person is experiencing it, like really was a huge difference. Yeah. Huge. Like immediately the triggered emotions like were dissipated. But one thing that I was like crazy, had a real revelatory reaction to was this person was reminding me of how my mom and my brother would allude towards like that they knew I did something wrong and I was in trouble, but they wouldn't tell me what it was. And sometimes for days. Wow. And I was like, that was horrible as a child.
Guilt, a lot of feelings of guilt.
Yeah.
And worries, right?
Yeah, like unbelievable. And I hadn't remembered it until I did that exercise. And then I was like, that happens so often to me. And then I started telling people about it and they would say, oh, that's awful. I can't believe like that's horrible, right? And I'm like,
how many years did you carry that?
Oh, I mean, 45.
Yeah.
Well, not since I was born, but yeah.
Yeah, it's intense.
I had no idea. Of all the practices of trying to heal, like that was one of the most intense. And I had no idea.
Yeah. I think sometimes when the opportunity is there, I'll do the inner child work with my client. And it's kind of the same where it's that empty chair technique where you yourself is now talking to the younger version of yourself in that empty chair. And you're communicating from a loving and graceful place because only you will know what you felt when you were 5 or 6.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes like our emotions get really suppressed, especially if we have parents that are not understanding of emotions. Maybe their own bandwidth is the only emotion is happy, sad, angry, right? And you have 2 minutes to be sad. Keep it moving, right? And only you in that moment can feel like what it means to feel sad maybe for the whole year and feel disappointed or guilt with yourself. And especially when clients have that breakthrough, I always try to enforce, hey, let's have a conversation with your younger self in this moment and see just how proud you are of yourself and that you can maybe reassure your younger self. Everything's going to be okay. You're turning out pretty amazing.
Yeah. Do you have to deal with transference as a therapist? And do you have your own therapy because of that?
I have my own therapist, see them once a week. And over time, as you learn your own counter-transference or the transference, that you can recognize, okay, this might have kind of made you feel dysregulated. How do I now ground myself versus press on and pretend like it didn't faze us, right? We're human beings. As therapists, we need help as much as, regular human beings will need grace and help. And so, yeah, transference is a real thing.
sorry, for some of the audience may not understand what that term means. Can you
Sure.
explain what that means?
Countertransference is like, let's just say you've met someone, you know someone, and let's just say you loved your 7-Eleven big gulp, and maybe I didn't have the best relationship with you, right? And the next person that I meet that brings that 7-Eleven big gulp is laying it flat on the table, and I might feel some types of way, even though it has nothing to do with the person, but it's that 7-Eleven big gulp that created a memory for me that has kind of had that nervous system response of flighting or freezing or maybe fighting, right? Because there's that resistance there. And countertransference is to really help us attune to that part. Like, that is a possibility. And how do I take care of myself in the moment, right? Because that will potentially prevent the help that we can provide for the client that moment in time.
Do you ever come across a client where you know from the beginning or after some point that their healing journey may be more difficult or maybe never even happen? How do you recognize that in a client?
I try to make it as client-centered. I think it comes down to whether they feel they need to continue with their healing journey or not. I can only provide the guidance, but it comes down to like what they want for themselves.
And have you ever turned away a client?
I have.
On what grounds would you turn someone away?
If I feel like there needs to be more resources, meaning maybe more expertise in specific areas, potentially like personality disorders, I might turn that away because I might want to focus more on family and individual and couples than really go deep with understanding how this trauma began with personality disorders.
So that was going to be my next question. Like when you have a couple coming to you for couples therapy and you notice like maybe the husband is cluster B or you're noticing some pathological behaviors there, what do you do in that scenario?
I would still process with them as a couple, but ultimately I think in that moment recommending some individual sessions where they can also have an expertise on deck that really helps them feel more supported. And
what are your thoughts on like therapy for cluster B? Cluster B is like pathological personality disorders, right?
Yeah.
Narcissistic personality, sociopathy, psychopathy.
Borderline. I think having someone that's their entire practice, I think that's important to make that referral at that time.
Oh, so you don't work with those type of individuals?
Yeah, not at this time.
From what I understand, their hope for change is not very high. Only because they may tend to try and manipulate the therapist, right? Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Be their best friend.
Be their best friend.
It's a possibility.
And because therapists are just human too, like they're not immune to that possibility, right? Wow. Do you find that you're able to help your clients achieve healing or real change in their lives?
If they want to.
If they want to.
Yeah.
So like that's the necessary component.
Yeah. What's their own desire, right? Do they want to do whatever they can to uncover that for themselves? Or if they're very resistant, it might be challenging and difficult.
Oh, I guess that's maybe a question that even potential clients ask you, right? And so marriage and family therapy. And what about like people with PTSD? Do you work with those type of individuals?
I do, yeah.
And how does that differ from the family stuff?
Well, complex PTSD can be really intense depending on when that trauma happened. And one of the recommendations and the guidance that I do provide is taking that self-care to kind of ground ourselves and not to kind of move through those emotions. Because when those flashbacks happen or those moments of emotional dysregulation happen, maybe that's not the best time to continue the conversation, right? Maybe that's not the best time to suppress ourselves and suppress what's really happening. And I think it really takes someone to be open to therapy, because sometimes complex PTSD is something that they're not ready to address that because they might feel like it's normal.
And what about in your own personal relationships? Like, do you find that you are more equipped, now that you have these tools, or you still struggle with, having to deal with, regular human interactions?
I think taking a lot of breaks is important. I work a lot, so making sure that when I do interact with my peers that I'm energized to interact, I think that's very important for me. So taking a lot of self-care.
Energized to interact. That's interesting. I never heard that before. That's really important. Yeah. Well, Christine, thank you so much for sharing this information with our audience. So we're going to move on to the final segment of the show, where we get to learn more about what you like in the San Gabriel Valley.
Sounds good.
All right, Christine, this is what we call the SGV3, and we want to know your 3 favorite or most memorable places or experiences in the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay.
So what would be number 1?
Number 1 is definitely JJ's. It's in Monterey Park. It's like a Hong Kong cafe. It's been there probably for like the last 30 years. And I think I have a lot of great memories there.
Is JJ across the street from Inez?
Yes.
And it's like a red brick building, right? Yeah. Okay. I haven't been there in a long time, but that's like on like Moore and Chandler or something.
Yeah. I think it's the main street.
Yeah. On Garvey. It's on Garvey.
It's on Garvey, and I think Inez or Moore.
JJ Cafe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a like old school place. Yeah. Awesome. And what would be a second place?
The second place would probably be MBC Dim Sum Seafood Restaurant. It's been another nostalgic place that when I think of that restaurant, I think of all the different families that I got to, like different generations of, Yamcha, and just being in that camaraderie and celebrating many life events there. And it's literally been the same for the last 30 years. And it's like it's a little time capsule.
Yeah. I never thought about that, how many different families, generations of families have celebrated all these different events there. Wow. That's really cool to think about. Such a loud place too, right? Like all this like movement and noise. A lot of
commotion.
Yeah. And what would be a third place?
The third place would probably be World Seafood Restaurant. It's over on Garfield and Valley. It's a newer restaurant. It's a refined Chinese Cantonese restaurant. It's pretty delightful.
World Seafood. What do you like to get there?
They have a really great dim sum and also a really great dinner type of menu. Very traditional Cantonese dishes.
Are there like live fish tanks on the wall?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Yeah. I like those kind of places.
And there's rooms for really loud karaoke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for sharing those 3 with us. Christine, I appreciate you coming on the show. I feel like I wanted to share all this with you, but I hope that the audience still got something about who you are and what you do from that. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can reach me at my website, which is my full name, ChristineKWong.com. And then also I have an Instagram, also Christine K. Wong. And
awesome.
You can DM me and message me. You can start there.
Great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, there you go. Another show in the books for you. I really enjoyed this episode. I was looking forward to it long before, actually when we booked it, right? Because these are topics that are really interesting to me. And I hope that you got something from this and from that conversation. We are in a large minority community here. I don't even know if you can call it that because the minorities are the majority here in the San Gabriel Valley, but where mental health issues are still maybe sort of stigmatized and taboo. But I would say for me anyway, getting therapy has been very pleasant, very helpful, very informative on my own life. And I really value that time. So if you're considering that, please do. It's nothing to be scared of rather. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. If you like this sort of stuff, please consider subscribing. And if you want to support the show in a more meaningful way, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon under MySGV Podcast. You can find our full back catalog of episodes on our website, mysgv.net. And until next week, we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us on the MySGV Podcast. Check out more of our content on our website, mysgv.net. This show was produced by Scott Wormuth, directed by Russell Mano, edited by Victoria Allers, and original music by Yone OG. If you'd like to join us next week as we capture and share more stories from our diverse community, feel welcome.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.